Steelers fans, the Pittsburgh Steelers are constantly looking for ways to improve, refine this roster, and put the team in the best possible position to deliver results when the games truly matter. And right now, two major decisions are creating plenty of discussion around Pittsburgh. One involving Mike McCarthy and the offensive line, and another involving Joey Porter Jr. and his future with the franchise. If you are a Steelers fan, make sure you hit that like button, because today we have a lot to talk about. And trust me, you will want to stay until the end, because these two situations could have a major impact on Pittsburgh's 2026 season. By the way, if you're looking for official Steelers gear, jerseys, hoodies, hats, or the new Sideline collection, I left the link to the official store in the description and comment. It helps the channel and keeps you geared up for the season. Let's start up front, because the Steelers may have a problem that is becoming more complicated than it needs to be. For months, Pittsburgh has been searching for the right combination along the offensive line. At this point, the apparent starting group is beginning to take shape. Dylan Cook has been working at right tackle, Spencer Anderson has received the leading opportunity at right guard, Zach Frazier remains the anchor in the middle, while Mason McCormick and Troy Fautanu occupy the left side. On paper, that group gives the Steelers something to build around. But according to Steelers insider Mark Kaboly, head coach Mike McCarthy may be thinking too much about potential problems that have not happened yet. And this is where things get interesting.
Kaboly believes McCarthy should stop constantly preparing for hypothetical injuries and instead focus on developing chemistry among the 5 players currently expected to start. During an episode of Kaboly plus Mac, he made his position very clear. The message was essentially this: choose your starting 5, let them play together, and give them meaningful preseason repetitions. And honestly, Steelers fans can understand that argument. Offensive line chemistry isn't something you can manufacture overnight. A tackle needs to know how his guard reacts to a blitz. A guard needs to understand when the center is passing off a defensive tackle. Players have to communicate when defensive linemen execute stunts and twists. Those reactions become instinctive through repetition. And Pittsburgh hasn't had as much quality practice time as it would have liked. Weather disruptions have affected training camp, and some practices have been shortened or modified. That means every meaningful repetition becomes even more valuable. McCarthy's desire to develop versatility is understandable. NFL teams lose offensive linemen every season. Injuries are inevitable, and having players capable of moving from guard to tackle can save a roster. But there is a danger. If you spend too much time preparing for every possible injury combination, you may never give your best 5 enough time together to become a cohesive unit. And that could become especially dangerous for Pittsburgh because of the man standing behind them, Aaron Rodgers. The Steelers are trying to maximize the final season of a 42-year-old quarterback who has already announced that 2026 will be his final season.
This isn't the time to have an offensive line still figuring out its communication in week 1. Rodgers needs protection. He needs clean pockets. He needs an offensive line that knows exactly what it is doing before the ball is snapped. If Pittsburgh wants to compete at the highest level, the offensive line has to become one of the team's strengths, not another question mark. That's why the preseason finale against Buffalo is so important. Instead of constantly rotating players, Pittsburgh could use that game to give the projected starters an extended opportunity to play together. Dylan Cook at right tackle, Spencer Anderson at right guard, Zach Frazier at center, Mason McCormick at left guard, Troy Fautanu at left tackle. Let them play. Let them communicate. Let them make mistakes together. And most importantly, let them begin building the chemistry they will need once the regular season arrives. Because there is another major Steelers situation that could become even more complicated. While the offensive line is trying to establish stability, the Steelers are facing a very different problem in the secondary. Joey Porter Jr. remains unsigned to a long-term extension. And now, former Steelers superstar James Harrison is essentially telling Porter that he should not even step onto the practice field until the situation is resolved. That's a powerful statement. Harrison recently discussed the situation and made it clear that if he were in Porter's position, he would prioritize securing his financial future before exposing himself to additional injury risk. And you can understand the logic. Porter is entering the final year of his rookie contract.
At the same time, the cornerback market has exploded.
Devon Witherspoon's massive extension with Seattle has pushed the market to another level, while other elite young cornerbacks have also secured contracts worth around $30 million per year. That creates a difficult situation for Pittsburgh. Porter wants to be paid according to his belief that he belongs among the league's best young corners. The Steelers, meanwhile, have to decide exactly where they believe Porter ranks, and that difference in valuation may be the biggest obstacle. There is a significant argument that Porter deserves a massive extension. His 2025 season represented a major step forward, and he has developed into one of the most important pieces of Pittsburgh's secondary. But there is also another side to the argument. Porter has not yet demonstrated the same level of consistency over multiple seasons as some of the cornerbacks commanding the absolute top of the market. That's where this negotiation becomes extremely complicated. Pittsburgh has already committed significant money to members of the 2023 draft class, including Nick Herbig and Keanu Benton. Porter could be next, but the price may be substantially higher. And that's where Omar Khan has to make a very important decision. Does Pittsburgh pay Porter now, before the market rises even further? Or does the organization allow him to play out the final year of his rookie contract and potentially revisit the situation after the season? The second option carries enormous risk. If Porter has another outstanding season, his asking price could become even higher.
But if Pittsburgh believes he isn't quite at the very top of the cornerback market, the team could decide that paying him now at an elite level creates unnecessary financial pressure. There is another element making this situation even more uncomfortable. Porter has not practiced during training camp. He remains on the PUP list because of his back issue. So while the contract situation is being discussed publicly, Pittsburgh also needs to determine when Porter will actually be ready to return to the field. And Steelers fans have to wonder how much of this situation can realistically be separated. Is this simply an injury situation? Is it purely a contract negotiation? Or are the two circumstances now becoming connected? Those are questions only Porter, his representatives, and the Steelers front office can truly answer. But one thing is obvious: the clock is ticking. What makes these situations fascinating is that they involve completely different parts of the roster, yet both come down to one thing. The Steelers need certainty. Mike McCarthy needs to establish his offensive line. Omar Khan needs clarity on Joey Porter Jr.'s future, and neither decision can be postponed forever. For the offensive line, the priority should be building chemistry among the players Pittsburgh expects to rely on. For Porter, the organization has to determine whether he is a foundational piece worth paying at or near the top of the cornerback market. These decisions may not generate the same headlines as a quarterback controversy or a blockbuster trade, but they could have enormous consequences during the season.
Because when December arrives, nobody will care how complicated the preseason roster decisions were. The Steelers will simply need their offensive line to protect Rodgers. They will need their secondary to make critical stops, and they will need their best players healthy, confident, and committed to the organization. When the Steelers entered their second preseason game against the New York Jets, everyone knew Will Howard was walking into a massive opportunity. This wasn't just another preseason appearance. Howard was expected to take the majority of the first half, giving him valuable snaps against a legitimate NFL defense, and, more importantly, giving him a chance to put pressure on Mason Rudolph in the battle for the backup quarterback position. Rudolph had already established himself as the safer and more experienced option. Howard needed to show something different. He needed to demonstrate that his potential was too valuable for Pittsburgh to ignore. Instead, the night went in the opposite direction. Howard threw 2 interceptions, struggled with pocket movement, took unnecessary sacks, and at times appeared to be trying to create plays that simply weren't there. And that's where the concern begins. Before the game, Steelers insider Mark Kaboly raised an interesting point about Howard's mindset. Kaboly suggested that Howard sounded like a player who was trying too hard to prove something during a single preseason half, essentially trying to prove himself to people whose opinions won't ultimately determine his NFL future. And once the game started, that concern seemed to become reality. Howard appeared determined to make something happen. The problem? Quarterbacks don't always win by making something happen. Sometimes the best decision is simply to take what the defense gives you,
protect the football, and live to play another down. That is especially important in Mike McCarthy's offensive system. Naturally, everyone is going to focus on the 2 interceptions, and they should. But Steelers fans need to look beyond the box score, because there were other elements of Howard's performance that could be even more concerning. His pocket movement was inconsistent. There were multiple situations where Howard had an opportunity to step forward in the pocket, but instead appeared to hesitate or attempt to escape and create something on his own. That's what coaches often call hero ball, and hero ball is dangerous for a young quarterback. You can't consistently survive in the NFL by believing you have to make the spectacular play every time the offense encounters trouble. Mike McCarthy wants his quarterbacks to operate from the pocket, make quick decisions, process coverage, and trust the structure of the offense. Howard didn't consistently do that against New York, and the first interception was particularly troubling. He locked onto his receiver crossing the middle of the field and failed to recognize the safety breaking on the route. That's not simply bad luck. That's a processing issue. NFL defenses are too fast for a quarterback to stare down his intended receiver and expect the ball to arrive before defenders react. Howard has to learn to see the entire field. He has to understand where the safety is. He has to anticipate where the defense is going before making the throw.
Because if he doesn't, NFL defensive backs are going to punish him. The second interception created a different concern. Howard attempted to squeeze a pass into a tight window, but the ball didn't have enough velocity and arrived behind his receiver. That is where arm talent becomes part of the conversation. There's a difference between seeing an open receiver and actually being able to make the throw required to reach him. Howard has plenty of physical tools, but this is exactly the kind of situation where his limitations can become visible. If the window is closing and the ball arrives late, the quarterback is putting the entire offense at risk, and that is something Pittsburgh simply cannot afford. Remember, the Steelers aren't evaluating Howard in a vacuum. He's competing against Mason Rudolph. Rudolph doesn't have Howard's developmental upside, but he brings something extremely valuable to an NFL roster: reliability. Rudolph knows how to operate an offense. He has played meaningful NFL football. He understands the Steelers' environment. And perhaps most importantly, Mike McCarthy already appears to trust what Rudolph can provide. That makes Howard's margin for error incredibly small. Coming into the preseason, Howard had an opportunity to make this competition interesting. If he had played extremely well against the Jets, Pittsburgh could have been forced to reconsider the entire quarterback hierarchy. Instead, Rudolph may have strengthened his position without even taking a snap. That's a difficult reality for Howard, and it creates an uncomfortable question for the Steelers.
Can they afford to develop Howard while also expecting him to be a reliable number 2 quarterback? Remember, Pittsburgh is thinking beyond 2026. Aaron Rodgers is the veteran starter, but the Steelers need to identify what comes next. Drew Allar is viewed as a potential long-term answer. Howard was supposed to be another intriguing piece of that equation. But if Howard can't establish himself as the clear backup, his path toward becoming a legitimate starting candidate becomes much more difficult. And that's why the preseason finale suddenly matters so much. The good news for Howard is that his story isn't over. One bad preseason game does not determine a quarterback's career. And we shouldn't forget that this is still a young player trying to adapt to the speed and complexity of the NFL. But the problem is timing. Howard doesn't have unlimited opportunities. He needed to use these preseason games to close the gap on Rudolph. Instead, the gap may have become wider. Now he has one final opportunity. But if he repeats the mistakes we saw against the Jets, Pittsburgh could be forced to make a difficult decision. And this is where things become fascinating. The Steelers don't necessarily need Howard to be perfect right now. They need to determine whether the mistakes are correctable. Is this simply a young quarterback pressing because he knows the opportunity is enormous? Or did Friday night reveal limitations that the coaching staff has already been concerned about? Those are two very different possibilities. If it's simply pressure, Howard can learn from it. If it's processing speed, pocket awareness, and arm limitations becoming consistent problems,
then Pittsburgh has a much bigger decision to make. Because the Steelers cannot afford to keep a quarterback simply because they hope he'll eventually become something. They need to see evidence. And right now, the evidence is mixed. There are throws that make you understand why Pittsburgh is interested in his development. But there are also moments that make you understand why Rudolph remains ahead of him. And for Howard, that's the painful reality he now has to confront. So now I want to hear from you, Steelers Nation. Do you agree with Mark Kaboly that Mike McCarthy needs to stop overthinking the offensive line and simply commit to his starting five? And when it comes to Joey Porter Jr., would you give...
Let me know your thoughts in the comments, because this is one of those situations where Steelers fans are definitely going to have different opinions. If you enjoyed this update, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next Pittsburgh Steelers update. And don't forget, the official Steelers store link is down below if you want to check out the newest gear. The 2026 season is getting closer, and every decision made right now could matter when the games count. Stay tuned, Steelers Nation. Black and gold football is almost here.